Hey, Lit Set, it's Jasmine.
Hey, Lit Set, it's Nikea, and this is Black Girl Lit,
the podcast. We're a podcast now, guys.
Where Black girls are lit,
we get lit,
and we read lit.
This is Black Girl Lit, the podcast.
All right, y'all, welcome to the 8th episode of season 2 of Black Girl Lit, the podcast.
We're a podcast now, guys.
So, tell y'all a little secret. We were just recording for about 10-15 minutes.
We were not recording. we were not recording.
Yeah, we got all the way to the reaction segment, and I was like, Jazz, we not recording.
And she started screaming, and I thought maybe like I was having technical difficulties or she couldn't hear me, and I was gonna have to start my little spiel back over. No, we gotta start the whole thing over because sis didn't hit the record button.
I was like, nigga,
yeah, go dang, got some dang. I mean, shit.
But today we are going to be discussing the novel Kindred by Octavia Butler. This was my pick, and it's in the category of science fiction, but there's not really any science, but you know, pseudo-science fiction, I guess. But either way, it's science fiction.
It's science fiction.
But before we get into the thick of things, Jazz, just a little check-in. How are you doing today, sis?
I'm doing pretty good today. You know, I'm out here just living. I got to travel for work. I got to go down to Georgia in the morning. Then I got to go to Boston next month. But high level view of my life, I'm doing pretty good. You know, go to therapy. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here therapy. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here trying. How about you, sis?
Well, I'm getting over this little sinus infection. I went to the doctor a week ago. I might have to go back because it's just not getting better. So if y'all hear me sound a little nasally, that's what it is. But you know, I'm just out here living my life, just living, you know,
just living.
And that's the high level view.
High level view, you know. Dang, I just okay. So any hoosers. I'm so confused right now because I'm like, I feel like we already did all this, but because we did. But now we got to do it again.
We did, but we got to do it again.
All
right, y'all.
So tell me about Octavia, the author of Kindred.
Right, about the author. Octavia Estelle Butler, often referred to as the Grand Dame of Science Fiction, was born in Pasadena, California on June 22nd, 1947. She has an Associates of Arts degree from Pasadena Community College, and she also attended California State University and the University of California, Los Angeles. During 1969 and 1970, she studied at the Screenwriters Guild Open Door Program and the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop, where she took a class with the science fiction master, Harlan Ellison, who later became her mentor. Her first story crossover was published in 1971, Clarion Anthology. Pattern Master, her first novel and the first title of her 5-volume Patternist series, was published in 1976. All right, with the publication of Kindred in 1979, Butler was able to support herself writing full-time. And she has won many, many awards from the 80s all the way up into the 2000s. She has won lots of awards, and she is one of the first African-American female authors to be considered very prolific in the genre of science fiction, because Jazz and I have talked about this offline. You don't see a lot of African-American writers in general in the science fiction genre, and then to have one written about African-Americans, and African-Americans just aren't secondary characters, they actually have a significant role in the novel, is pretty Black girl lit. And that is Octavia E. Butler.
It's super Black girl lit. Like, I can't think of any other. First of all, I don't really read science fiction, so I may not be the most, well versed in that genre. But even so, I don't really know many Black people who write within that genre. So for Octavia to be coming in and doing it in the 70s, okay, sis, I see you. Okay, I also see you, Nikea. I see you.
Oh, you can see me.
Yeah, that's how cameras work.
Now we're going to go to our next segment, y'all, where Jasmine flourishes and thrives. She's going to synopsisize Kindred for you all.
come along with me on this journey while I synopsisize Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Okay, so Kindred is this story of a African American woman who's a writer named Dana, who lives in California with her husband Kevin, who is a white man. And Dana discovers that she has this crazy superhuman ability to time travel. And when she does time travel, she time travels into antebellum South. Well, Maryland, I guess that's kind of the South, but antebellum Maryland on a plantation before the Civil War. So, plantations before Civil War had what? Slaves. So, while Dana is on this plantation, she is thrust into slavery. And it's the story of how she's able to kind of bounce back and forth between her present reality in 1976, as well as going back to this plantation during this actual slave time. While she's on this plantation, she encounters, the slave masters, a lot of atrocities happening to the slaves, as well as some of her own ancestors. And the story is just her dealing with the ability to, one, time travel, and two, also the things that she envisions and sees while she's at the plantation, and also how they affect her relationship with her husband, Kevin. So that is the high level view of Kindred by Octavia E. Butler.
Thank you for that synopsis, sis.
And so now we'll go into our reactions. Nakia, how did you feel about this book? What were your thoughts? How did you feel? What happened?
So when I began reading this novel, I was immediately hook, line, and sinker, because it starts off with a prologue, so you know the ending or part of the ending before you start reading the novel. So I was like, what's going on? Who is Dana? Why is she missing? This is a spoiler podcast episode. Why is she missing her arm?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? Like,
where her arm at?
Yes. Like, she walking around with a stump. And then shut up, Jazz, shut up. And then I kept reading, and when I first picked this novel, I did not realize that this was written in the 70s. It does not read like that. A lot of books can, when you read them, they can be very stagnant because of the language and just the context and the information that they're talking about. But Octavia did such a good job. Like, this book transcended time, and even the context of the book, time was transcended, because she's going back and forth between the 1800s and the 1970s. So I just appreciate Octavia's writing. And even though I knew, as I was reading, I knew it was written in the 70s, I'm like, Octavia, she could have just written this yesterday. Mm-hmm. And it's relevant. The topic is still relevant. It just makes sense. And I think it also sounds very current because Dana doesn't spend a lot of time in the 70s.
Yeah.
But even then, when she is in the 70s, it's like I could see this couple in the early 90s, this highly educated couple moving. Like, it makes sense. It was well written.
Yeah, no, I agree. So for me, very similar to Nakia, one of the things that my initial reactions was like, I couldn't believe that the book was written in the 70s either. Like, I text Nakia this, I was like, Octavia was way ahead of her time when she wrote this, because granted, I wasn't around in the 70s, so I don't know what people in the 70s were thinking, but I don't think that they were thinking about time travel. I don't feel like that's something that they thought about or were dealing with, or like thought that people was out here time traveling. So I thought that's why she was ahead of her time. And then also was not what I was expecting. So, honesty moment, I don't read the synopsis for the books. The books I pick or the books Nakia picks, I very rarely read the synopsis before we get into the book. I like to say it's because I don't want to have a preconceived notion. It's really because I'm just lazy and I just need to get some books and I just need to read. But so not knowing what the book was going to be about when I started reading it, and I'm reading like, why doesn't Dana have an arm? And I'm like, what is going on? And then she does her first jump to the past. I was like, what is happening? I went back and read the synopsis. I was like, oh, this is what this book's about. But before that, I had no clue, and it was not what I was expecting. I feel like at times the book was hard to read because you're reading about some really serious things that happen to people of color. Like, my own ancestors probably could have gone through and dealt with some of these things. So it was triggering in that sense. I felt like sometimes the character Alice reminded me of Ernestine from the show Underground, because she was willing to do whatever was necessary for her survival as well as her children's survival. And then we'll discuss that later. And then I called this Back to the Future Django edition. That's how I saw it. Because like Back to the Future, like if you've ever seen Marty McFly and he goes back to the future, he has to make sure that his parents end up together so that he can exist. And I felt like for this book, there were situations where Dana had to make sure things happen for like future existence. So that's why I felt like it was kind of like Back to the Future, and it was Django edition because it was slavery.
Slavery.
So yeah. So those were my reactions.
Now to our next segment where we are going to discuss major scenes and topics. And before we get into this discussion for this week's episode, we just want to let you know that there will be spoilers.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
We decided before we started recording that we just cannot talk about this book without spoilers. So stop listening right now and go read. This book's been out since 76. What are you doing? Or 79. What are you doing, sis? Let's go.
Right now. Right. Granted, I didn't know about this book until IKEA presented it to me. So if you ain't know about it, because it was written in 76, it's really not. It's okay. So I ain't know about it. But sis, it's about to be a whole bunch of spoilers. So again, like IKEA said, if you don't want to get them spoils, turn it off, go read, and then come back and revisit. Or if you're a person like me who don't care about spoilers, then continue listening.
Or if you're trying to read Kindred for a class and you just need a few little tips so you can pass.
Right. Keep listening.
Okay, so some major topics were interracial relationships. Because as Jazz mentioned, Dana is married to Kevin, who is a white man.
White man.
And then we also have Rufus Whalen, who is at the time when the novel starts, he's just a son of the slave owner, but Dana is related to him. So Dana's Black, so that means that therefore Rufus had some relations with one of his slaves, which he was in love with, okay? Like legit in love with his slaves. So we all know that stuff happened. You know, he said he loved her, but he was raping her. So don't know how that works.
Is that love?
Yeah. And then just also in general, like complicated relationships, because there's a relationship between the slave and the master. Because a lot of people in our generation, I'm sure even from the 70s, would think that if I was a slave, I wouldn't do this and I wouldn't do that. The slaves didn't have the information or the knowledge that we have, and they were trying to live and survive. So if you from 2019 were thrown into the 1800s on a plantation and somebody said, your master said, you gonna sleep with me or I'm gonna kill your baby, what you gonna do? What's the choice you gonna make? Okay.
Sleep with them.
Exactly. So there's just those complicated relationships, and also like slaves being obedient, and people think that slaves should have just risen up and blah 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 blah. But it's just a complicated relationship between slave owner and slave. Also, I guess a topic would be like the uppity. I'm gonna say this in this word. I guess I can say it. The uppity nigga. And that's what throughout the novel, that's how the slaves and even the white people classified Dana, because she's coming from the 70s and she has an education and being thrust into the 1800s. So the idea of the uppity nigga and being complicit or compliant in a separate topic is being complicit or compliant in some of the degradation and the negativity that's going on the plantation, because Dana is complicit in rape in this novel. So yeah, so I guess we'll go into that deeper on when we talk about the scenes. So Jazz, what are any topics you have?
So my topics were very similar to yours. I had interracial relationships. I had slavery, but from a modern perspective, because like Dana is this modern woman. So she's going into it with having already known the history of slavery and whatever kind of the outcome is, and going into it with that kind of perspective. Definitely also have like that master slave like power struggle, like you mentioned. And I, just for the record, and I tell this to everybody, all my friends know this, if I was ever a slave, I'm flat backing my way through it. Okay, flat backing it. Like he said, people got to make decisions and struggle. I already have decided, if somehow I was a slave and I get thrust into slavery, sometimes I just start time traveling and I end up on a plantation. I'm sucking a fucking master. If that's what I got to do to survive, that's what I'm going to do to survive. I probably shouldn't say that, and y'all probably going to judge me, but I'm just saying, if that's the way that I can ensure my survival, because I'm not going to be the type of person to run. I'm not athletic enough. I'm not savvy enough. I can't read the stars. Like, I just know myself. So in order for me to survive, that's what I'm just going to have to do. But that's beside the point. But yes, those are my topics. Were pretty pretty much the same as yours.
You learn something new every day. um, Jasmine.
I'm
Um,
sorry. I'm just being honest. I got to be honest with myself.
so to go back to the topics that relate to some of the scenes. So, like I mentioned, Dana is complicit in rape because Rufus is in love with a slave named Alice, which Alice is actually Dana's great great grandmother. So Rufus gets Dana to convince Alice to come sleep with him. So Rufus has already raped her. He's beat her before, but Alice has started to shy away from him because she was married to Isaiah, I think his name was, and he got sold away. But
and it's a side note, and it's worth mentioning that Alice was a free woman and before all this, and she just kind of gets pushed into slavery because he runs away, I think.
Yeah, she runs away. So now, yeah. So Rufus gets Dana, tries to convince Dana to convince Alice to sleep with him, and I think he threatens Dana with like beating her or something. So Dana actually goes to Alice and was like, you need to, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but like, you should do this. You know, you might like him, and he says he's not going to hurt you, and blah 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 blah. So that when she did that, I was like, sis, like no. But then I had to realize she's in this time period where that's like a means of survival. And in the back of the Kindle book, there's like an essay. I forgot who it was written by, but there's an essay in the back, and it discusses some of the things that are going on in the novel, and it relates Kindred to the slave narrative. So, or the female slave narrative, and oftentimes, like female slave narratives were written, they did things that morally wouldn't seem right, but it was a means of survival. Like,
sucking and fucking to get through life.
There's a slave narrative. Oh, what is the name of it? What was her name? I don't forgot. Oh, wait. Oh yeah, he called the author of this article called this book a neo-slave narrative. So like a modern day slave narrative. But there is a slave narrative where a woman has to like save her children, and she does what we would consider immoral things just to keep them safe. But just imagine, like, if your child's life is on the line, like, what would you do? What would you do to save your child? So if your master says you have to sleep with me or take a beating for your child, what would you do to keep them alive?
What would you do if your son was at home crying?
Right.
I'm sorry.
There it is. That's the slave narrative. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs.
That's true. No, that's good. So I had a different perspective of when Dana forced Alice into it. So I did see the side of like having to force herself to do something just to ensure your own survival. But I saw it as Dana doing it to ensure her own existence because she knew that these two people needed to link up because they were her ancestors. And in order for her to be even existing, she had to ensure that they was consummating. So I saw that as a way of Dana selfishly wanting to like make sure that her whole generation herself was able to be created. Because if they never connected, if Alice never slept with Rufus, she would never exist. So that's how I saw it.
Right. I think it does play both of those roles. Like, it had to happen. But I'm kind of segueing off topic here. But my thing is like, why did Dana have to keep going back into the past? Like, this stuff already happened without her going back into the past. So why does she have to go back there and save him from drowning and save him? Because Dana gets called back to the past every time Rufus is like in trouble or his life is threatened. And I think I highlighted this. Octavia broke the chapters up into different titles, or the different segments of the book. So the first one's called The River. Rufus is drowning. The Fire. He almost sets the house on fire. The Fall. I think The Fall. He fell and broke his leg or something. The Fight. He's in the woods like dying because he got into a fight with somebody. The Storm. I think that's when he was like drowning, about to drown in like a puddle or something when it was raining. And then the last one is The Rope. which it actually doesn't directly involve, the rope doesn't involve Rufus, but Rufus was about to kill himself because of something that
Yeah,
happened.
something else. Yeah.
So we won't give away that. Not super spoilers.
Yes.
But that's how Dana gets called back. So my question is, I don't know if this can be answered. Like, why did Dana have to get called back? Like, why did she have to experience this?
Yeah, and
This, like,
I could that's what I couldn't figure out either. And I actually had that question written down. Like, Rufus needed Dana to survive, but how would the story go if she didn't time travel? And why is she so connected to him? Like, I understand that's her ancestor, but I still couldn't figure out, and it wasn't really explained as to why she had to
right,
keep traveling back. And I think that's something that I would have wished could have been explained, but I don't know how you explain that because this is
right.
already such a supernatural, crazy thing. So, but yeah, that was something that I just didn't understand myself either. Like, okay, what happens if she decides not to go? And then also, I think it's interesting, spoiler alert, that when she was able to go back, she was able to take Kevin back. And then when she went back, that it came back and left him there. I thought that was interesting as
Yeah.
well.
I was just about to bring that up. Like, that's a major scene. So the second time she time travels, excuse me, perfect. Her husband is touching her when she's going to the 1800s, and he goes with her. And when they go to the 1800s, it can be like years for them. But when they come back to the 70s, this literally happens over like this whole thing happens over maybe like 2 months time period. So it's a short period in the present, but when they go in the past, it was extensive time. And Kevin gets left there, like Jazz said.
Mm-hmm.
For him, it was 5 years. For Dana, it was like 2 days or something like that.
I think it's like a week or something.
Okay, a week. So she goes back to the plantation. He's not there. She has to get letters to find him. And then when they finally meet up and then they come back to the 70s, Kevin is different.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in the novel, you actually see where Octavia made comparisons between Kevin and Rufus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the article in the back of the novel, it said like she did this on purpose, like to complicate Dana's story even more. Because I was like, why? When I read, Kevin doesn't read as white. You
No,
don't know,
he does not.
You don't know he's white until Octavia tells you. And I'm like, why did she give Dana a white husband? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that. But in the article, it just says to complicate her story even more. And she's warring between these two characters because, like, Kevin's been there. He stayed in the 1800s for 5 years. So it's natural that he would adapt some of the habits and some of the mannerisms. And Dana even mentions like Kevin has an accent like Rufus now, which Rufus, she doesn't really like him, but she knows he's needed for her family to come to fruition. But Rufus is the typical slave owner, white man, racist, discriminatory trash.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to have her husband be like him, I feel like that is a mind freak right there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was really, really interesting. I will say though, when she does like reconnect with him and she finds out what he's been doing during those 5 years that he was away, I was happy to see that he was trying to be somewhat of an ally to the people and didn't get sucked up into it. But at the same time,
Right.
it was very interesting how Octavia made the comparison between Rufus and Kevin and kind of like, I don't know, it was just a very interesting book and very interesting read and very, I don't know, thought provoking. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it made me
I was
ask myself, like, what would I do if, like I said, if I got thrust into that time? Like I said, I'll flat back my way. But still, aside from that piece, how would I really actually handle being in the 1800s, having already the knowledge? And I have way more, not way more, but I have more recent knowledge than Data did because I'm in 2019. So there's a lot, that's 40 years right there between Data and I. But like, I don't know if I would be able to adapt. I don't know if I could go time travel like Dana and be okay with it. Like, not saying that she was okay with it, but she adapted very quickly each time she went back. And I would not be okay.
Yeah. And it even mentioned like how the Wayland farm became home to her. Like she even called it home sometimes when she would go back. And then how the 70s, like they had just moved into their new place, so it wasn't even home to them yet. So she wasn't even settled in there, and how this slavery time period became home to her. And like Jazz mentioned, we think we have all this knowledge, we know so much. And in the article in the back, there's a quote that says, her literacy, her education, and her historical knowledge sometimes lulls her into a false sense of security. Like she thought that she would be okay because she knew so much. But that goes back to the uppity nigga thing. Like the white folks and even the black folks, they didn't like that a black person, what they said, spoke like a white person. She could read, she could write, she wore pants. And I was like, oh no, what is
We don't trust
this?
you.
We don't do that.
No, sis.
Yeah, she was not like really like Dana wasn't really aware of the things that were going on. And every time she came back to the 70s, she would try to like read up on the history to like get a better understanding of what was going on. Sorry, there was a quote from the back. So we said the novel starts off with Dana's arm missing. And at the end, we really don't know why her arm is missing, like how that necessarily happened, like if somebody chopped it off or
Her arm got
whatever.
stuck because Rufus was laying on it.
Oh, I don't know. I gotta go back and read. I just finished the book this morning.
I
But
did too, but
Octavia Butler in an interview, I was like, why did she have to lose her arm? It says, Octavia said, I couldn't really let her come all the way back. I couldn't let her return to what she was. I couldn't let her come back whole. And that, I think, really symbolized her not coming back whole. And then she said, antebellum slavery didn't leave people quite whole. So you think about the people who were actually slaves and experienced that, and even the ones who were alive when, you know, slaves were freed, you're not whole from that experience. And you think about African Americans today, like I really think we do have post-traumatic slave syndrome. And you know, I got that term. I didn't realize I got that from one of my sorority sisters. Her name is Bria Campbell. She wrote a paper, an essay about it. I'll put it in the show notes about healing from post-traumatic slave syndrome with dance and movement therapy. Shout out to her. She's published. Go check her out. Cite her. But I do think that African Americans, Black people, are struggling from post-traumatic slave syndrome. Like we're not able to be whole because we're in a world where the people in power are not like us. They don't understand us. Like even if we have a sacred space or a space just for us, they want to be a part. They want to come in. And they don't understand why we need to have these spaces because our bodies were not our own. We were considered property for so long. And now that we have some autonomy, we just want to have some of our own sacred spaces. Not to say that we are better than you or we don't like you, but we need us. We need us. We need to come together.
And we're constantly shown things even now where we still are treated as not necessarily property, but we still don't own our own things, our own culture, our own ideas. Because if I go get colored braids, I'm told it's ghetto, but 2 days later, Katie down the street is going to have the same thing. So
and
like,
it's high fashion.
And it's high fashion. So it's like we still don't have anything. So I definitely agree that 400, 500 years later, when none of us have ever been a slave a day in our lives, but we still have this post-traumatic slave syndrome because of what our ancestors went through and how this country still refuses to actually deal with slavery and like the reparations, which don't necessarily have to be monetary, but still the reparations for the ancestors and the people and dealing with it. They still want to kind of just sweep it under the rug, like, yeah, that's just an ugly blemish, but to the point where they won't even talk about it. Like you have former governors saying that the Confederate flag is a sign of heritage and strength and symbolism. No, it's a symbol of hate. So I don't know, until the America actually can have an honest conversation about slavery and what it really truly meant for the entire country, for the people, and what it means now, and how we're still in a system of systemic racism, we're never going to be free of our kind of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Like it's always going to kind of be a part, unfortunately. Like I think people are trying to make strides and do things to kind of get away from that and kind of develop their own mindset about it. But at its core, when you have people like the person that they elected president, I didn't elect
he who must not be named.
right. I didn't elect him. I didn't vote for him. But people who, who they elected president, like thinking that's okay. Like, I don't know. It's a very weird time. So like Nakia said, reading this book now, even though this book was written 40 years ago, resonates very much now in the things that we're dealing with and going on in our own country and our own mindset and kind of looking at it from a modern perspective.
And then one last thing I want to mention, we're about to go over time, but so on the plantation, Dana does experience like slaves being sold and people dying and families being torn apart. Yes, just one. So there was a quote in the back. This essay in the back just really like it kind of brought the whole novel together for me. It says, although the Black community is persistently fractured by the sudden removal of its members through either the calculated strategy or the mere whim of their white controllers, that community always patches itself back together, drawing from its common suffering and anger a common strain. It is the white characters in the novel who seem odd, isolated, pathetic, and alien. So I just want to bring that back to the present. Like, oftentimes, the separation of the Black family has been perpetuated into present time now. But I think about that, like Black people, and not just physically, people have been removed from our community, but even like people have been taken away from our community, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and even Nipsey Hussle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people have been assassinated from our community, and we have been physically separated and segregated, but we always find a way to come back together, to make ourselves whole, to make it work in a sense with what we have. Like, the people in power, think that by killing our leaders that we're going to fall apart and that our movement is not going to happen. No, you don't know us. We have strength beyond measure, mentally, physically, and emotionally, even though we're dealing with all these traumatic things that are going on in society today, and even the things that they dealt with back then. Like, families still were able to come together. If a father was taken away, someone else would step up and fill in the gap. If a child was lost, someone would step in and try to help that mother to heal and fill in the gap. If a mother was taken away or killed, someone would step in and fill the gap for those children. So you're never gonna catch Black folks slipping. That's why I said that.
Okay. And they think they are. And no, we're not. And I don't know. I just
say something, sis. Say something.
I just get mad because like they just keep saying, so like, I don't know, the idea that the Black home is not like it's a perfect breeding ground. Like we breed excellence within Black homes. Like we know how to raise that within our community. And I know that the media tries to perpetuate this image that we're out here killing each other, that there's so much Black on Black crime, and that all Black men are going to end up in jail, drug dealers, all these things, which is not true. Like I've been watching First 48, and literally every case, so there's a whole bunch of Black people, and I get to myself like, dang, why is there so many Black people killed? But we are the minority. Like we held so much of a small percentage of the population within these cities that it just perpetuates this narrative that's not true. Like Nakia said, do we know how to come together? Yeah, y'all are gonna, like, people are gonna try to continue to take away our leaders, but we're breeding new ones all the time. We can continue our movement forward. Like we know how to do that. And I just feel like at some point, once we all get on the same page, because I feel like there's always going to be crabs in a barrel. There's always going to be some crabs in our barrel. But once we get rid of them crabs in our barrel and we can all climb out that barrel together, oh, y'all won't be able to tell us shit. Now, I don't know if this is going to happen in my generation. Maybe it will happen in my kids' generation. But this is not going to be America forever. I don't believe. I have true faith and belief that this is not going to be America forever. This system that they have set up against us will crumble and then it will fall. By one way or another, either we all will rise up together or Mother Nature's gonna fuck us up. One of the two is gonna happen. It's probably gonna be Mother Nature first, but either way, something's gonna happen, and this is not gonna be America, and it just won't last. Like I don't know, people are just getting too woke and too understanding of what's happening for this stuff to continue, and I hate it. For once the baby boomers go, no offense to the baby boomers, because that's our parents, that's our grandparents, but once them boomers go, it's over. Like.
Woo, major scenes and topics took a lot of time.
And it did, because this book it just resonated. It just had a lot
of
things.
And that's not even everything. That's not even everything. It's not.
It's so much within this book.
All right, y'all. Our next segment would be Sips, which includes getting audience feedback, questions, comments, and concerns. So we don't have any today, but if you would like to be included in this segment, send us an email at blackgirllityt@gmail.com, or you can DM us at blackgirllit_ on Instagram. So you can type up something, or you can send us a little audio clip of you giving us some question, comments, concerns on any of the books and topics that we have discussed in our podcast. This is what you all came here for. We about to rate this book and head out the door.
What? Okay, bars.
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 I'm going to rate this book first. And of course, if y'all can't tell already, I gave this book a lit.
Pew, 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 pew.
It was very well written. It was transcending time. I love the topic. And I like the essay in the back. I don't know if that's in the physical novel, but in the Kindle edition, the essay in the back just kind of brought some things together and opened my eyes to some things to help me understand some things a little bit more. But Octavia E. Butler, I want to read more from her. So don't be surprised if you see another book in another season by Octavia Butler. It's lit.
It's lit. Okay, so Nakia rated it a lit. Pew, pew. Jasmine rated it a lit. Pew, pew.
I was going to say, I'm about to fight you.
I know she was. I know she was going to. What was the reason? What was the reason if I didn't rate this book a lit? So this book is definitely a lit. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It took me a little bit to read the book just because of the life stuff, but it was a very, very good book. It was very thought-provoking. I think if you can walk away from a book asking yourself how you would react in those situations, what you would do, and then also like can invoke conversations like the Naki and I have just had, that makes it a lit book. It was very well written. Octavia girl, yes. I want to read more of your science fiction books. And what's crazy is I don't even see it as being like super science fiction. Like,
well, it's like pseudo science fiction because there's no science in it though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the time travel. But I mean, it was really good. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I liked it. Lit all around. Lit.
All right, y'all. This book is a Black Girl Lit approved. All right, y'all. So our next book that we are going to be reading is Mr. Still Your Girl by Bria Noreen, which is Jasmine's pick.
It is my pick. But for Mr. Still Your Girl, we read the first like couple words of it. Oh my God, sis. Okay.
Y'all, the opening sentence in this book is fuck
in ecstasy. Okay.
Yeah.
So
so pick up a copy and read it with us.
Come read with us. Because Bria come out strong. She came strong. Okay. She came out shooting. Okay.
All right. As always, stay Black Girl Lit.
Y'all stay Black Girl Lit out there.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Harper, for the bye. Oh.
That's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Leave us a 5-star rating and a top-notch review to get us to the top review page on iTunes. And be sure to follow us and listen on SoundCloud.